amazed me and captured my attention. And I think we all try to copy somebody, whether we know it or not. And eventually worked my way into a radio station and got to be a DJ and newsreader and whatever you had to do in those days. And eventually tried hockey, and somebody said it was okay. And later on I got a chance to do it, as we used to say, in Canadian mainland, up in Canada. And then I got a shot finally in '69 and did my first game, playoff game in Boston.
Okay.
Canadians.
I started as a youngster at the Edmonton Journal back in 1987, and the guys I followed were clear. Cam Cole, John Short, Ray Tuchansky, Terry Jones, some of the more national guys. When you were a young guy breaking into the business, there was a lot less voices out there for you to listen to on your little radio. Who were the names for you?
Foster, as I said, and a little bit later, Danny Galvin, but Foster and Billy, his son. And I had a transoceanic Zenith radio, actually, a pretty good one. And had a good antenna rig for that. And I heard Jim Gordon in New York, Fred Cusick in Boston, and on and on and on. I got a lot of them. I really got a lot of hockey broadcasters.
One of the, for some reason, we all have memories, right, of a certain Bob Cole call, maybe a certain Foster Hewitt call, certainly Rod Phillips call. That's the first one you think of when you think of the man, right, behind the microphone. For me, and you, it was January 11th, 1976. It was the Red Army at the Spector against the Philadelphia Flyers.
They're going home.
They're going home. What was that like?
Oh yeah, that sticks with me for a while, I guess. It was impromptu, if I can use that word. It just happened. We were in the Soviet Union, of course, in '72, that great series, and then again in '74 with the WHA Team Canada team. And now this Super Series '76, it was billed. I did the first game at Madison Square Garden in New York. The Rangers lost 7-3 to Red Army. And the final game was to be the deciding game of the series. And in other words, the winner of this last game in Philadelphia would be declared the winner of the series. So it was a big game, as it turned out, and that was a Sunday afternoon. And that's when Van Impitt and Harlamov, and they didn't like it. There was a star player, and he was hit hard. And a lot of discussions at the bench, which was directly in front of us, and our booth in the old Spectrum was very close to the ice and very close to the Soviet bench. So we couldn't hear them, not that it mattered, but they were yelling and shouting. Lloyd Gilmore was the referee, we could hear that. And I did hear him say at one point, "Get back out there, you're going to get another penalty." And then they opened the gate and walked toward me, underneath me. So Dick Irvin was with me doing the game, and Dick was the first one to say, "They're leaving," because it was a shock to all of us. But they were going that one straight line into the lobby area outside the dressing room back there, and I said, "They're going home. They're going home." And then it just kept going, and so, and it's still going. I understand they're playing everywhere.
My understanding was that they were going home until Al Eagleson went in and said, "You go home, you don't get your money."
Apparently, Mr. Campbell and Al Eagleson ironed it out by saying, "Yep, you won't get paid unless you finish the game."
Let's go back a little further. The classic Canadian call on the '72 series on the winning goal and Paul Henderson's goal in Game 8. Of course, the one we all remember, and the one I watched on one of those stand-up televisions where they have the little doors when you were in elementary school, remember? So you could sit in the seats and they'd roll it in on these big wheels. It was a big screen. And we got to take off school and watch that game, and we, of course, listened to Foster Hewitt's call back then. That's '72, so yeah, I'm in grade 2. You were calling that whole series on radio, CBC radio. A really interesting part of the book was how Bob learned the pronunciations of all the Russian names, because it wasn't as easy as it was today. Obviously, the internet, it was a different game. I'm sure you learned a lot about hockey, a lot about Russia in that series. Going into '72, what didn't you know? There must have been more you didn't know about what you were about to face than you did.
Everything. would be a clear-cut answer. I didn't know the first thing about anything going into that, but I was really excited when they told me. I was actually in Ottawa covering the Canadian Open and on radio, and we got word that afternoon that CBC Radio had been awarded the 72 series upcoming in September. And then I had a call from Alan Gilroy, who was the head of CBC Sports, Network Sports, to tell me that I was going to be the man to call the whole series. 4 games in Canada, 4 games in Moscow, and 2 games in Stockholm, and 1 in Prague, Czechoslovakia, coming home. So I was blown away, really. It's just my first big test.
How old are you at that point?
72. Yeah, I was 33.
Okay.
Yeah.
And see in the world.
Wow. I mean, for somebody who had never traveled very much, I got to come to Canada and do games in the National Hockey League out of St. John's, Newfoundland, and then get chances to go all over North America broadcasting hockey, and now I'm going to Europe, where I've never been, and then further on to the Soviet Union. It was quite something, and I really didn't realize how lucky I was until I began writing this book with Stephen Brunt, and thinking back of all the things that has happened to me, and it's really unreal. So I'm kind of lucky that way, and I don't know if I can remember it all, but I hope I have remembered most of it in the book.
The book is Now I'm Catching On. He's Bob Cole. I'm Mark Spector from Sportsnet. And I want to go back to Game 4 of that series. Anyone who's read up, or that was a real turning point. For those of you maybe who maybe weren't around in '72, us Canadians, we figured we were going to crush the Russians. This was going to be easy. All our guys showed up. Half of them weren't in very good shape. The Russians couldn't possibly be as good as hockey as we were. Well, they started playing, and they kicked our butts in the first game in Montreal. I believe we won in Toronto. We went to Winnipeg. It was a tie, but it was becoming really clear that the Russians had a better system. They were in way better shape. They knew what they were doing, and they were really good. So then they go to Vancouver, the last game in Canada, and the Russians beat the heck out of Canada in that game. And now it's done in Canada. Now we're going back to their country, and there's 4 games in Moscow, and we don't know what we're going to face in Moscow. And we're down, and we're getting kicked. You're calling this thing on radio. When you're getting on that plane from Vancouver to go overseas, were you a little afraid that you might be calling a series that would be recorded in history as the time Russia proved they were way better at hockey than we were?
You know, I thought about that after that first game you mentioned, 7-3 Soviets in the Montreal Forum. And we were very, very down after it came. I remember back at the hotel.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, we were floored. We got the first 2 goals, you'll remember, and then they took over, and it was no contest. And it was obvious that our team, Team Canada, was not in playing shape. We all knew that, we all felt that Canada was a better team with all the NHLers. First time the National Hockey League would have their players involved in the series against the Soviets, who were winning everything all the way through. And then throughout Canada then, as you mentioned, the 4-1 win in Toronto, the tie in Winnipeg, which I think we should have won. We gave up in the 3rd period, and then the game in Vancouver. And on the way over, everybody decided, they did themselves, the players, that they needed to get in better shape. And I think the 2 games in Sweden was a big help, and 1 in Finland. And then we were ahead in the first game in Moscow by 4 goals going into the 3rd period, and lost the game by 1. Not many people recall that one, but we were in shape, and we were going to win, it looked like. But we lost by a goal, but then won the last 3.
I mean, could you imagine a time if we would put together our Olympic team now with all the best Canadian players, and they'd go over and play 2 games in Sweden, and it wouldn't even be on TV? Like, I remember going.
It's on the radio.
It's on the radio. We could listen to the radio. But back then, they played these games that we, other than CBC radio, they were scarcely recorded.
That's right.
Let's go forward. You became really the lead voice of Hockey Night in Canada, concurrent with the Edmonton Oilers becoming the best team in the world during their time. I guess your thoughts. Did you do all 5 Oilers Stanley Cup victories?
Yes.
I believe you did.
Proud of that.
Right. And what was it like? What was it like watching that team in their heyday?
It was fantastic. It was great hockey, number one. You had Grant Fuhr, great goalie, he was the number 1 goalie, and you had so many young players who were coming along into their own, into their prime. Coffee, and not to mention, you know all the names as well as I do now. And it was such an exciting time for the NHL. After the Islanders had their 4 cups, and then they got stopped, and it was the young Edmonton Oilers who took over. And I can tell you, it was so exciting the next few years. 5 cups to prove it, and everybody in Edmonton still remembers the great days, and why not keep remembering?
I remember your call. The balloons were falling on the ice in '84.
Okay.
And you called them the new kids on the block, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
That
Yeah.
was the days before boy bands.
It was exciting, I can tell you that, and I loved it every minute.
Well, you forged a relationship with Wayne Gretzky. I mean, you were the head play-by-play man. He was the captain and the best player in the world on the best team. And to this day, you have a pretty strong relationship with Fritz,
Yes,
correct?
he phones me periodically just to say hello and how are things going, Mr. Cole. He will never, ever call me by my first name. He won't do it. And I remember Janet saying to him one time, we were all together, and she said, Wayne, you're embarrassing Bob. You don't have to. And Wayne just ignored that and carried on. Which way are we going, Mr. Cole? Give it up. He won't do it. He's great. He's a fine man.
The business has changed a great deal. We still are fortunate enough to hear Mr. Cole calling games on Sportsnet and CBC, wherever they're putting the games these days. But there's so many more voices. I grew up listening to Rod Phillips, and again, it wasn't that long ago that the Edmonton Oilers would go on a 6-game road trip, and only 2 of the games would be on television. And the other 4, we'd sit at home and we'd listen to Rod Phillips, because that was it. There was no other way to keep track of your hockey team. And the next day, you'd go straight to your Edmonton Journal and you'd read Jim Matheson, because without him, you didn't have a clue what was going on with your hockey club, right? Today is different. There's way more voices. There's way more games. There's a game on every night. You get the package, center ice package. You can watch 6 games of that if you want. The state of the business is different. There's more voices. Is it a better business today, or was it better when you broke in?
I think it was better when I broke in. I don't know why I say that, but you're right. There are so many games now, and not to compare one announcer from another announcer. Everybody has their own way of doing things. And I was taught years and years ago, before I got into the business at all, by Foster Hewitt, whom I was lucky enough to meet and ask him about hockey broadcasting. And he talked to me in his office in Toronto for nearly 2 hours about hockey broadcasting, because he told me later that he could see in me that I was interested in trying to get better at what I was doing. He just listened to a little 10-minute tape I had, which is terrible, but anyway, he listened to it, and some of the things he said were pertaining to what you just asked. The number of announcers, the styles of announcers, and he said, Bob, someday you're going to be up here. I feel that. And when you do get up there and you broadcast a game, when you go home and your friends tell you that they saw the game Saturday and it was a terrific hockey game, exciting from start to finish, he said, when they say that to you and they don't mention your name, now you've done your job. So that's what I've tried to do, broadcasting my hockey games. Try to make you people as hockey fans enjoy the game as I am, because I do enjoy the game. I get into the game, I feel butterflies. I won't bore you with all the details, but I hope I've answered the question, Mark.
Bob, Mr. Cole is famous in our business among the various different color men that work with you know, it's not like the old days where you would work with, who was your primary color man for most of the years? Harry Neal.
I guess Harry
yeah.
came along.
Right.
Brian McFarlane first and ran Harry. Yeah.
So you and Harry would work a lot of games.
Yep.
It changes now. There's more guys, so there's a little more unfamiliarity among the crews. And Bob is famous for having a real respect for the sounds of the arena and the sounds of the game. And Bob will give what color men around the industry call the hand. When it's not time for the color man to jump in, but it's time to listen to the crowd. And you'll get the hand when you're the color man for Mr. Cole, and you better not talk.
A funny thing happens when you get involved in the game, like I think I try to do, and something is happening, and I know the crowd is coming. I can do that, yes. I remember Harry saying to me one time, "You put that hand up one more time." But anyway, it's automatic. It's just to have the viewer enjoy the game.
We've been very blessed in Edmonton. We have Wayne Gretzky. We got Connor McDavid now.
Wow.
I wrote him today, little pitch for Sportsnet.ca. Every time I watch Connor McDavid play, he looks even better than he looked the last time. You've seen Gretz, you've seen Mario, you've seen Sid, you've seen Connor now. Put him into place. What does he look like to you?
He is great today. And you know what? He's just 19 years old, so he's going to get better. I cannot believe how. But he is an amazing, talented hockey player. No question about it. The first time I saw him play was in Montreal. He came back after that darn injury early in his start in the NHL. And he looked so smooth and so fast, and he wasn't even trying, it appeared, but he's a leg and a half above all the other players. Really, really, almost too fast. He's amazing.
It's you know, we cover a lot of players. You've covered many more than I. There are certain ones that you look back at your career. I'm sure you've got many that you go, I was very proud to call that game. I was proud to meet that player. I was proud to write that story as a writer. And I know talking to players on other teams already. I talked to Marian Hossa, I guess it was yesterday morning, from the Chicago Blackhawks. He said, McDavid is my favorite player. He says, there's no players in the game anymore that make me sit back and go, wow. And then this kid came along. And Marian Hossa's played 1,300 games. He was playing when Connor McDavid was wearing diapers. So there are so few players that can impress the rest of their peers